And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo. And who needs the cast spells, eh? Overrated in my opinion. Casting spells, who needs it? This is a deck idea that I had in maybe it was my last 5 builds, not my last 5 unique builds video, but the one before that. And I've sort of been on a tear lately of putting my money where my mouth is, right? This is kind of becoming a series of videos of, talk is cheap. I keep saying you guys should try these ideas out, and I'm going to try out some of them myself. And one of the most interesting ideas I've heard is, can you make a deck without actually casting spells? If you did, how would you do it? And what I talked about in that video was Derevi would work with that strategy. I had a patron throw that idea out for me because, of course, Derevi has that ability, 1 green, white, and a blue, put Derevi onto the battlefield from the command zone. So if you're not casting any spells, Derevi will work because you can get around the whole casting part. Also gets around the commander tax part as well. And when they said that, I was like, oh, okay, well, that's pretty interesting. There's a commander, a pretty good commander, that you can use with the I don't cast any spells strategy. But what else would you be doing? Well, of course, you would have to do abilities from your hand. And there actually is a fair amount, like it Reinforce, for example, right? Break Ties is actually a pretty darn good card in the commander, in my opinion. 2 and a white instant, choose 1. So it's a modal effect. You can destroy an artifact, or you can destroy an enchantment, or you can exile target card from a graveyard. Those are all fantastic abilities, but also has Reinforce 1, ability that a lot of people might have forgotten about. Pay 1 and discard this card, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So this is a card that you can use without casting it because it has an ability that you can discard from your hand. Bannerhide Groshuk also has Reinforce. Reinforce 2. Pay 1 and a green, discard this card, put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. It also has Scavenge. So that ability we can also use without casting spells. 5 green, exile this card from your graveyard, put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to this card's power on target creature. So of course, if we have our commander out, we can Reinforce 2, and now it becomes a 4/5 flyer, not bad. And then we can Scavenge 7 and put 4 counters on it. So now we've put 6 total counters on it. So now it's an 8/9. That's a pretty menacing commander, right? Of course, the channel lands auto includes here Boseiju who endures being the best. This is removal without casting, right? Who'd have thought you could do it? You actually can. Colossus Sky Turtle, another great one that has 2 channel abilities. 2 and a green, discard it and return a card from your graveyard to your hand, or 1 and a blue, discard it to return target creature to owner's hand. It is also an enchantment creature, which we will get back to. Akroma's Vengeance, for white, sorcery, destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. But of course, it has cycling, right? Cycling 3. And that's obviously the best ability to use if you're not actually casting stuff. You're cycling stuff. And that is mostly the strategy I went with this deck. I went in a couple of different directions, and I will just say I am casting stuff in this deck. I didn't go with the entirely I never cast things. And there's a very specific reason why, because I was trying to think of, you could just make this janky deck where you never cast anything. Your opponent's counter spells would be pretty useless. If you're playing in a play group where your buddies like to play Baral decks or Talron decks, that could be really good because of course they can't counter your stuff. They're just going to sit there with a mitt full of counter spells. I guess they would use them on each other. That's an advantage, but we really want more of an advantage, right? Where's the advantage to not casting things? And I came up with a way to take advantage of it from a very interesting source. Getting back to the cycling thing, right? One of my favorite cards that has to do with cycling of all time is Astral Slide from a World Championship deck. When this was in standard, 2 and a white enchantment. Whenever a player cycles a card, you may exile a creature, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control, so you're blinking it, right? We also have Astral Drift, which does something similar, but also when you cycle it, because it has cycling as well, right? Cycling 2 and a white. So that will work here as well. So that's 2 cards you could do with that strategy. But I went with more the cycling strategy here. Of course, there's lots of support there. Drake Haven, 2 and a blue enchantment. Whenever you cycle or discard a card, you may pay 1. If you do, create a 2/2 blue Drake creature token with flying. So this is kind of a win con in the deck, right? Now, not just the cycling cards. Again, remember, the Reinforce is a discard ability. The Channel is a discard ability. So those will trigger our Drake Haven as well. This is a win con in this deck, without a question. We are creating a 2/2 Drake flying token army without actually casting anything. New perspectives. 5 and a blue enchantment. Whenever new perspectives enter the battlefield, draw 3 cards. As long as you have 7 or more cards in your hand, you may pay 0 rather than pay cycling costs, which can be really, really important with cards like Decree of Savagery, which cycle for 6 mana, or Resounding Silence, which cycles for 8 mana. Hooey! But we're getting an effect out of it, right? When we cycle it, we exile up to 2 target attacking creatures. You probably don't want to pay the 8 mana, but if you have your new perspectives out, that will be 0. So pretty darn good. Now, an astute viewer will notice all those cards I just mentioned are in fact all enchantments. And it's funny how this deck came together, because I had a guy, when I did the 5 builds video, comment on that video, and I will give shout out. He does have a channel, a small one, but he does have a channel. Strategy is the name of the channel. He's only got a few videos on there, but he had come up with this idea himself, funny enough. The idea of having a Derevi as a commander in a deck where you don't want to cast anything, but he came up with sort of ultimately the idea that I would go with, right? How do we take advantage of not casting things? It works with the Epic ability, right? And the card he used was Eternal Dominion. 7 blue, 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 sorcery. Search target opponent's library for an artifact, creature, enchantment, or land card. Put that card on the battlefield under your control. Then that player shuffles and has the Epic ability from Saviors of Kamigawa. It's a cycle of cards. There's one of each color. For the rest of the game, you can't cast spells, right? That's how we're going to take advantage of it. We're going to cast this spell, and then we're going to not be able to cast spells for the rest of the game. That's why the I can't cast spells thing actually works here. We can still channel, we can still cycle, reinforce, all of that stuff will still work here. However, I'm not using Eternal Dominion, of course. I'm using the epic spell that happens to fit the theme of what I'm doing already. Because I've got so many enchantments, I'm using Enduring Ideal. So that's the epic spell that I decided to go with. 5 white, white sorcery. Search your library for an enchantment card. Put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. And of course has the epic ability. So this will work so much better here because I'm already doing the cycling already. So I can go get my Astral Slide. I can go get my new perspectives with my Enduring Ideal. And of course, can't cast spells for the rest of the game. Well, good thing I actually built my deck around that. So yes, I am cheating here. I am actually casting spells, but the idea of the deck is I get my Enduring Ideal so that once it resolves, I can very easily go the rest of the game without actually casting spells. Neat little combo that he had in the deck, and I think that's the reason why he put the deck together, is with Hive Mind. And if you have your Hive Mind out, and again, it's an enchantment, but this we want out before our Enduring Ideal. So 5 in a blue enchantment. Whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell, each other player copies that spell. Each of those players may choose new targets for the copy. So their combo was with Hive Mind and Eternal Dominion. Of course, if you cast it, everyone else copies it. Here we can do the same thing, but with Enduring Ideal. So that means when we cast our Enduring Ideal, if Hive Mind is in play, everyone else gets a copy of Enduring Ideal. And they get to search their library for enchantment cards. I mean, okay, that's great. Maybe they got a Rhystic Study, maybe they got a Smothering Tithe. They're not going to do them much good because, of course, the mana is useless because they can't cast spells for the rest of the game. Drawing cards is probably useless because they can't cast spells for the rest of the game. So this will make it so none of our opponents can cast spells for the rest of the game. Now, they can go get enchantments out of their library, but are they going to have enchantments that'll close out the game? Are they going to have channel and reinforce and cycling? And are they going to be able to take advantage? Not likely. Likely it is game over for them, right? Funny enough, we also have another combo in here that will make it so that our opponents can't cast spells. You know, it's very ironic in that we're making a deck where we don't want to cast spells, and I have 2 combos here so that our opponents can't cast spells. Decree of Silence, of course, is an enchantment. It's 6 blue, blue enchantment, very expensive, but also has a cycling ability. Again, this works with both aspects of what we are doing. We can cycle it for 4 blue, blue. Whenever you cycle it, you may counter target spell. So it does become counter a spell without actually casting, but we want to fetch this with our Enduring Ideal and put it into play. When our opponent casts a spell, counter that spell and put a depletion counter on Decree of Silence. If there are 3 or more depletion counters on Decree of Silence, sacrifice it. And of course, people are probably very aware of the combo with this, with Solemnity, a card that combos with a lot of things. Counters can't be put on artifacts, creatures, enchantments, or lands. And of course, this is an enchantment as well. So we can go fetch it, and once those 2 cards are in play, assuming your Decree of Silence hasn't already been sacrificed, now it will not get those depletion counters, and every spell your opponents cast will get countered. So this is still allowing your opponents to cast stuff. I guess if they have something that, like a Cavern of Souls or something, that will get around this, but essentially it makes it so your opponent can't cast stuff. It doesn't win you the game, but it's very easy to do so from there. We got to be able to destroy stuff. Aura Shards is obviously a great enchantment that we can go get to put into play. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you can destroy an artifact or enchantment. So if our opponent by some random chance has an enchantment in their deck that shuts us down, that they can go fetch or already have in play or whatever, any problematic artifact and enchantment, obviously we don't have to cast our commander. We can just use their ability. And when it enters the battlefield, destroys an artifact or enchantment. Or we can go get that Colossal Sky Turtle. Remember, it's an enchantment creature. So now we can go fetch that guy and put him into play. That will trigger our Aura Shards, or that Greater Tanuki. Again, another enchantment creature that also has a channel ability. That will work here, right? Now we can actually go get, if we want to close out the game, a 6/5 trampling creature ain't bad to help close out the game, right? Enigmatic Incarnation is another really funny way that we can actually not cast creatures, but get creatures into play. 2 blue and a green enchantment at the beginning of your end step. You may sacrifice another enchantment. So any enchantment in play that we don't really need anymore, we sacrifice that. If you do, you search your library for a creature card with a mana value cost equal to 1 plus the sacrificed enchantment's mana value, and put it onto the battlefield. So this is a way for us to get creatures into play. It's an enchantment that we can go get and then use this enchantment to sacrifice our other enchantments to go get creatures. So it's a way to sort of turn our Enduring Ideal into a way to fetch creatures and put them into play, which of course then works with the Aura Shards and a lot of other things as well. And we can just go get Raised by Giants, which is going to make our commander a 10/10. Pretty easy way to close out the game. We'll just fly in with our commander and smash our opponents. A lot of neat ways to win with this deck. So I'm cheating here a little bit. You will be casting spells. Basically, you will be casting spells up until you cast your Enduring Ideal. And then once that gets going, now you're good to go, right? So that's why the I don't cast spells strategy works here. And funny enough, also, having your opponents not cast spells is kind of an ironic way to win with this deck as well. It's a really neat deck. It is certainly janky, no question about it, but it definitely works well. There is a couple of different ways you can go with it. Certainly, you can play this deck without ever casting the Enduring Ideal, and it'll work just fine. It is advantageous to you to not cast spells. Again, counter spells don't work. That's a great way to take advantage of that. A lot of people like counter spells in the commander format, and if you particularly hate having your stuff countered, this is a great deck to go after. The deck list is in the description below. Feel free to check it out if you want. That is it for today, though, and thanks for tuning in.